It was 1998, and I was the mum of a 9-year-old son at the time, whose belief in the magic of Christmas was unwavering. It was this unwavering faith that inspired me to create a radio commentary for the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It all began with his one simple question to his dad. Dad, why don't some children believe in Santa Claus? It was 3 weeks before Christmas, and we'd all been enmeshed in the festive season for weeks. But my husband is a wise man. And he looked at his son and he replied, well, some people don't believe in God. That doesn't mean God doesn't exist. When my husband and I later talked about this conversation, I started to think about how sad it is that so much has changed and that some people don't believe in anything they can't see or feel or touch, while others will believe in anything anyone tells them. So I began to consider how my own ideas about Santa and the Christmas season had changed since I was a little girl so many decades ago, and yet perhaps it hasn't changed as much as I thought. I do remember that fateful Christmas when I was 8 or 9 years old, when I found the Christmas gifts hidden away on a shelf in a storage room in the basement. I remember sitting on the floor, considering what I was seeing. But unlike other children, instead of running to my family and friends and declaring that they had lied all those years about Santa, I closed the top of the box and I slid it back in its spot. I said nothing to anyone, especially not my little sister. She was only 4 then. And I kept right on believing. And that belief in Santa, the spirit of Santa Claus, is what the season is all about for me. So much has changed in the world, but the one thing that hasn't changed is my unwavering belief in Santa Claus. And it was several years before my son asked his father that question that I first began to wonder about the season. My son was enrolled in an urban public school, and it was time for the annual Christmas concert. Oh, how I remember that show. It's as if it happened yesterday. It was 1994, and my little son was 5 years old. The 90s started it all. That was the year that principals of elementary schools across the continent began dictating that there would no longer be a Christmas concert. It would now be a holiday concert. Well, you can imagine our confusion as we sat in the gym. We were watching the littlest pupils on stage when they began singing one of my favorite Christmas songs, It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas. And then I heard it, loud and clear. It's beginning to look a lot like the holidays. What the heck? The holidays? Whatever happened to Christmas, to quote Frank Sinatra. All I could picture was a summer day on the deck with a drink in my hand. It's not really the image one expects to conjure during the fading weeks of December, but I take my holidays in the summer, so I guess it fits. Christmas, it seemed, was now relegated to the dusty shelves of the forgotten festivals. That was also the week our next-door neighbors hoisted their enormous annual sign on their lawn, proclaiming that Jesus is the reason for the season. And I began to feel a little like old Scrooge. Bah, humbug, I thought. So what is the reason for the season in our multicultural 21st century world? I believe the reason is the spirit of Santa Claus, no longer a religious icon, but the harbinger of goodwill toward others, of drawing together family and friends, and of sharing a bit of our lives with others near and far. Of course, historically, Santa Claus can trace his beginnings to the legend of St. Nicholas, a Christian saint, who was born in the 3rd century BCE in what is now modern-day Turkey. Now, he eventually became known as the protector of children and sailors. But what about for us in North America? He actually didn't begin to seep into our culture until sometime around the turn of the 19th century. In 1822, a writer named Clement Moore wrote his book, An Account of a Visit from St. Nicholas, which we all know today as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, where Santa Claus was described as a jolly old elf. Then when political cartoonist Thomas Nast caught on to Moore's poem story, he drew the first image of what looks like modern-day Santa Claus. And then we have Coca-Cola advertisements from the 1930s to thank for our jolly image of Santa today. Santa Claus is not a religious symbol. But if I reflect on my neighbor's sentiment, I will admit that Jesus is the historical reason and may be important to those whose spirituality involves an organized religious experience. But Santa Claus transcends this. For everyone, the Spirit of Santa Claus is what we continue to call Christmas, regardless of religious or political leanings. The Spirit of Santa Claus is what makes this time of year different from the rest. One of my son's favorite Christmas shows from his childhood is the old Muppet Family Christmas. Now, millennials will remember it, and so do I. At this time of the year, I often reflect on something Kermit says to his nephew when asked about the meaning of Christmas. If it weren't for times like this, he said, life would just pass in a blur. And remember the story of the young girl who in 1897 wrote to the New York Sun editor with her question, "Is there a Santa Claus?" The wise editor wrote back to the little girl and published her letter to the editor and his response. He said, "Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist. How dreary would the world be if there were no Santa Claus? Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign there is no Santa Claus. 1,000 years, Virginia, nay, 10 times 10,000 years, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood." Well, I think we can all thank Mr. Francis Pharcellus Church for that response. And now in the 21st century, we also understand Santa Claus is there to gladden the heart of adults as well as children. To my own now 30-something son, I can continue to assure you, yes, Ian, there is a Santa Claus. And we'll go on celebrating this Christmas season regardless of religious divisions and self-righteous indignation. So when I see you on the street and I call out Merry Christmas, or I say Merry Christmas to you as you hand me my receipt at a cash register, please understand this. I'm not making any kind of religious or political statement. I'm wishing you the Spirit of Santa Claus. And I'd be the happy recipient of Hanukkah wishes or Kwanzaa greetings or Children's Day compliments or even a happy Festivus, or the good wishes of any other festival that embodies this spirit of Santa and the message of fellowship, sharing, love, and above all, imagination. Merry Christmas to everyone.